The rain came down like bullets that Tuesday evening, turning the quiet streets of downtown into rushing rivers. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he hurried toward the ATM outside First National Bank. His shift at the Beam construction site had run late, and he needed cash before the corner store closed. The weather forecast had promised clear skies, but Mother Nature had other plans. As he approached the machine, he noticed a woman standing there, completely soaked from head to toe. Her long brown hair stuck to her face, and her thin jacket offered little protection against the downpour. She fumbled with her purse, her hands shaking from the cold. Water dripped from her clothes onto the concrete, forming a small puddle at her feet. Marcus hesitated for a moment. He could see she was struggling, but he didn't want to intrude. The woman inserted her card into the machine, but it came right back out. She tried again, and the same thing happened. Her shoulders slumped in defeat, and she let out a frustrated sigh that Marcus could hear even over the pounding rain. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, stepping closer. "Are you having trouble with the machine?" The woman turned around, and Marcus was struck by her tired brown eyes. She looked exhausted, like someone who had been fighting battles all day. "It keeps rejecting my card," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I really need to get some money out." Marcus nodded toward the overhang above the ATM. "Why don't you step under here where it's dry? Maybe your card got wet." She moved under the small shelter, and Marcus could see her more clearly. She was probably in her early 30s with a kind face despite her obvious distress. Her clothes were simple but clean, though now thoroughly drenched. She wiped her card on her shirt, trying to dry it off. "Here, use this," Marcus said, pulling a clean handkerchief from his pocket. His grandmother had always insisted he carry one, calling it proper manners. He was glad for her old-fashioned ways now. The woman looked surprised by his kindness. "Thank you," she said softly, carefully, drying her card with the cloth. "I'm Sarah, by the way." "Marcus," he replied with a smile. "Try your card again. Sometimes these machines get finicky when it's wet." Sarah inserted her card once more, but again it was rejected. Her face fell, and Marcus could see tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. She was clearly at the end of her rope. The machine might be having issues with the weather, Marcus suggested. "There's another ATM about 3 blocks down at the grocery store, but you shouldn't walk there in this rain. You'll catch pneumonia." Sarah shook her head. "I don't have a car. I took the bus here, but the next one doesn't come for 2 hours. My phone died, so I can't even call a taxi." She looked defeated, staring out at the relentless rain. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives, though neither of them knew it at the time. "Look, I was just getting some cash myself. How much do you need? I can lend it to you." Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly ask a stranger for money. That's too much." "You didn't ask," Marcus pointed out. "I'm offering. Sometimes people just need help, and if I can provide it, why wouldn't I?" He stepped up to the ATM and inserted his own card. "Seriously, how much do you need?" Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between pride and necessity. "It's for my son's medicine," she finally admitted. "He has asthma, and I need to pick up his inhaler from the pharmacy before they close. It's $40. Marcus's heart went out to her. He had grown up with a single mother who had struggled to make ends meet, and he remembered the stress she carried when money was tight. He withdrew $60 from his account and handed her the bills. "Take 60, he said. "The extra 20 is for a taxi so you don't have to wait for the bus in this weather." Sarah stared at the money in disbelief. "I can't take this from you. You don't even know me." "Everyone needs help sometimes," Marcus said simply. "When I was a kid, my mom and I were in tough spots plenty of times. Strangers helped us when they didn't have to. Now I can help someone else." Tears flowed freely down Sarah's face now. "How can I pay you back? I don't even know your last name." Marcus pulled out his business card from his wallet. It was simple. Just his name and phone number for his handyman services. "Don't worry about paying me back right away. When things get better for you, you can call me. Or better yet, help someone else who needs it." Sarah took the card with trembling hands. Marcus Johnson, she read aloud. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can. This means more to me than you'll ever know. What's your son's name? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about the child who needed medicine. David, Sarah replied, a smile finally breaking through her tears. He's 8 years old and the most amazing little boy in the world. He wants to be a construction worker when he grows up, just like the men he sees building new houses in our neighborhood. Marcus laughed. Well, tell David that construction work is honest work, but he should stay in school and maybe think about being an engineer or architect. Those guys design what we build. Sarah nodded, clutching the money and his card. I will. Thank you so much, Marcus. You have no idea what this means to us. Just take care of that little boy, Marcus said, and get yourself home safely. Sarah flagged down a taxi that was stopped at the red light. As she climbed into the back seat, she rolled down the window. I won't forget this kindness, she called out as the cab pulled away. Marcus stood under the overhang, watching the taxi disappear into the rainy night. He felt good about helping someone in need, just as his mother had taught him. He had no idea that the boy he had just helped provide medicine for was actually his own son, or that this random act of kindness would lead to the most important discovery of his life. 3 weeks passed before Sarah found the courage to call Marcus. Every time she looked at his business card, which she kept carefully tucked in her wallet, she felt a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. She had managed to scrape together the $60 working extra shifts at the diner where she waited tables. The tips weren't great, but every dollar counted when you were raising a child alone. Sarah lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of town with her son David. The building was old but clean, and their neighbors were mostly other single parents trying to make ends meet. She had moved there 5 years ago when David was just 3, starting fresh in a new city where nobody knew her story. It had been the right choice for both of them, even though it meant leaving behind everything familiar. David was a bright, curious boy who filled their small apartment with laughter and endless questions about the world around him. He loved building things with his toy blocks and was fascinated by the construction sites they passed on their walks to school. Sarah often watched him play and wondered what his father would think of the amazing little person he had become. That evening, after David had finished his homework and was watching cartoons, Sarah finally dialed Marcus's number. Her hands shook slightly as she pressed the buttons. What if he didn't remember her? What if he thought she was taking too long to pay him back? Hello? Marcus's voice was warm and friendly, just as she remembered. Hi, this is Sarah. We met at the ATM during that rainstorm a few weeks ago. You helped me when my card wasn't working. Sarah, of course I remember. How are you doing? How's your son? The genuine concern in his voice put her at ease immediately. We're doing much better, thank you. David's asthma is under control and I've been working extra to pay you back. I have your $60 ready. That's great to hear, Marcus said. But there's no rush on the money. I'm just glad everything worked out okay. Sarah smiled, though he couldn't see it. You were incredibly kind to help a complete stranger. I'd like to meet you for coffee sometime and give you the money properly. It's the least I can do. Marcus considered this. He had been thinking about Sarah occasionally over the past few weeks, wondering if she and her son were all right. There had been something about her situation that reminded him of his own childhood struggles. I'd like that, he said. There's a nice cafe downtown called Murphy's. Do you know it? I do. I actually work nearby at the corner diner on 5th Street. Would Saturday afternoon work for you? Perfect. How about 2 o'clock? I'll be there. And Marcus, thank you again for everything. Saturday arrived with bright sunshine, a stark contrast to the stormy night when they had first met. Sarah arrived at Murphy's Cafe a few minutes early, wearing her best dress and carrying her purse carefully. She had left David with Mrs. Rodriguez, her elderly neighbor who sometimes watched him when Sarah had to work late shifts. Marcus walked in right on time, and Sarah was struck again by his kind demeanor. He was tall and broad-shouldered from his construction work, with gentle eyes and an easy smile. He spotted her immediately and walked over to her table. You look much better when you're not soaked from head to toe, Marcus said with a grin, and Sarah laughed. I feel much better too, she replied. Please sit down. I ordered you a coffee. Black, which seemed like a construction worker's drink. Good. Guess, Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. Though I do like a little sugar sometimes. They talked easily, like old friends reconnecting rather than near strangers meeting for the second time. Sarah told him about her job at the diner, how she had been working there for 2 years and hoped to eventually save enough money to go back to school for nursing. Marcus shared stories about his work, the satisfaction he felt from building things that would last, and his dream of starting his own construction company someday. Tell me more about David, Marcus said. You mentioned he wants to be a construction worker. Sarah's face lit up the way it always did when she talked about her son. He's obsessed with building things. Last week he built an entire city out of cereal boxes and toilet paper rolls. He says when he grows up, he wants to build houses for families who don't have homes. That's a pretty noble goal for an 8-year-old, Marcus said, impressed. He sounds like a special kid. He is, Sarah agreed, her voice soft with maternal pride. He's had to grow up faster than most children, but he has such a good heart. Sometimes I wonder where he gets his compassion from. Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Kids often have better instincts about kindness than adults do. Maybe he just learned from watching you take care of him. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Here's the money I owe you, she said, sliding it across the table. I can't thank you enough for your help that night. You probably saved David's life. He was having a really bad asthma attack and we had run out of his emergency inhaler. Marcus took the envelope but didn't open it. I'm just glad I was there at the right time. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be. Do you really believe that? Sarah asked. I do, Marcus replied. My grandmother used to say that there are no coincidences, only connections we haven't understood yet. Sarah smiled at this. Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She taught me that helping others isn't something you do for recognition or reward. You do it because it's right and because someday you might be the one who needs help. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for the boy he had been, losing his parents so young. I'm sorry about your parents. It must have been difficult. It was, but my grandmother made sure I knew I was loved and that I had a place in the world. She passed away 3 years ago, but I still try to live by the lessons she taught me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah found herself drawn to Marcus's quiet strength and genuine kindness. It had been a long time since she had met someone who seemed to understand the challenges of life without judgment. Would you like to meet David sometime? Sarah asked impulsively. He'd love to meet the man who helped get his medicine. He's been asking about you. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at the invitation. I'd be honored to meet him. Does he like baseball? There's a minor league game next Saturday. He loves baseball, Sarah said, her eyes brightening. He plays in the Little League, though he's not very good at hitting yet. Perfect. Why don't we all go together? My treat to celebrate David feeling better. Sarah hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. He would absolutely love that. Thank you, Marcus. As they left the cafe together, neither Sarah nor Marcus could have imagined that their coffee meeting was setting in motion events that would reveal the most shocking truth either of them could imagine. The following Saturday arrived with perfect baseball weather, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze that made the flags at Riverside Stadium flutter lazily. Marcus arrived at Sarah's apartment building right on time, carrying a small gift bag and feeling unexpectedly nervous about meeting David. Sarah opened the door with a warm smile, and Marcus was struck by how different she looked in casual clothes, relaxed and happy in her own environment. Behind her stood a boy who was unmistakably her son, with the same warm brown eyes and gentle smile. David was smaller than Marcus had expected, but there was something confident and mature about the way he carried himself. David, this is Marcus, the kind man I told you about, Sarah said, placing her hand on her son's shoulder. David stepped forward and extended his hand with serious formality. Thank you for helping my mom, Mr. Marcus. She told me you made sure I could get my medicine when I was having trouble breathing. Marcus shook the small hand, impressed by the boy's manners and maturity. "It's nice to meet you, David. Your mom tells me you're interested in construction." "I love building things," David said, his formal demeanor melting into childlike enthusiasm. "I'm making a skyscraper out of blocks right now. Do you want to see it?" "David," Sarah said gently, "we need to get going if we want good seats at the game." "Actually, I'd love to see your skyscraper," Marcus said, genuinely curious about what the boy had created. David beamed and led them into the small living room, where an impressive tower of blocks rose from the coffee table. It was at least 3 feet tall and showed remarkable engineering for a child's project, with a stable base and decorative elements added with different colored blocks. "This is amazing," Marcus said, crouching down to examine the structure more closely. "You've got good instincts for balance and proportion. How did you figure out to make the base wider than the top?" "I tried making it the same width all the way up, but it kept falling over," David explained. "So I thought about the trees in our park. They have big trunks and smaller branches, so I made my building like that." Marcus was genuinely impressed. The boy had figured out basic engineering principles through trial and error and observation. "That's excellent problem solving, David. You're thinking like a real builder." During the drive to the stadium, David chattered excitedly about school, his friends, and his favorite baseball players. Marcus found himself charmed by the boy's endless curiosity and the thoughtful questions he asked. When David mentioned that his class was learning about different jobs, Marcus offered to bring him to a construction site sometime to see real building in action. "Really?" David's eyes lit up. "Could I wear a hard hat?" "Safety first," Marcus said seriously. "Everyone on a construction site wears protective equipment. But yes, I could get you a proper hard hat." Sarah watched this interaction from the passenger seat, her heart swelling with an emotion she couldn't quite name. It had been just her and David for so long that seeing him connect with a positive male figure was both wonderful and slightly overwhelming. At the stadium, Marcus bought them hot dogs, peanuts, and sodas, insisting it was all part of the experience. David had never been to a professional baseball game before, even a minor league one, and his excitement was contagious. He asked Marcus to explain the rules, the positions, and the strategy behind different plays. "Why did the pitcher throw the ball outside?" David asked after a particularly wide pitch. "Good eye," Marcus said approvingly. "That was a ball, which means it wasn't in the strike zone. The pitcher was trying to get the batter to swing at a bad pitch, but the batter was smart enough not to take the bait. So baseball is like a thinking game, not just hitting and running?" "Exactly. The best players think 3 moves ahead like chess." Sarah listened to their conversation with growing amazement. Marcus was patient and encouraging, never talking down to David or dismissing his questions. He seemed to genuinely enjoy the boy's company, and David was clearly developing a case of hero worship. In the 7th inning, when David went to the bathroom with Sarah, Marcus found himself thinking about what a good kid David was. He was polite, intelligent, and had a natural curiosity that reminded Marcus of himself at that age. There was something familiar about the boy, though Marcus couldn't put his finger on what it was. When they returned, David slid into the seat next to Marcus, rather than between his parents as he had been sitting before. "Marcus, do you have any kids?" he asked with the directness that only children possess. The question caught Marcus off guard. "No, I don't have any children," he said carefully. "How come? Don't you want to be a dad?" Sarah started to intervene, but Marcus held up a gentle hand. "I think being a father would be amazing," he said honestly. "I just haven't found the right person to have a family with yet." David considered this seriously. "My mom says my dad wasn't ready to be a dad when I was born, but maybe he would be ready now that I'm older and not so much work." Sarah's face flushed, and Marcus could see she was uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "David, honey, let's watch the game. The home team is about to bat." But David wasn't ready to drop the subject. "Mom, do you think Marcus would make a good dad? He explains things really well, and he's nice to people he doesn't even know." "David," Sarah said more firmly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Marcus came to her rescue. Your mom is absolutely right. We should pay attention to the game. Look, the bases are loaded and this could be a grand slam. The potential grand slam turned out to be a pop fly, but it successfully redirected David's attention. For the rest of the game, he focused on the action, cheering loudly for good plays and groaning at strikeouts. As they walked back to Marcus's truck after the game, David skipped between the two adults, clearly having had the time of his life. This was the best day ever, he announced. Can we do this again sometime? If your mom says it's okay, I'd love to take you to see more games, Marcus said, looking to Sarah for permission. Sarah nodded, though something in her expression seemed conflicted. We'd like that very much. As Marcus drove them home, David fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Sarah turned to look at her sleeping son, and Marcus caught a glimpse of an expression he couldn't quite read. Part contentment, part worry, and something else that looked almost like fear. He had a wonderful time today, Sarah said quietly. Thank you for being so good with him. He's an incredible kid, Sarah. You should be proud. I am, she said, but her voice carried a weight that Marcus didn't understand. When they arrived at Sarah's building, Marcus helped carry the sleeping David upstairs. As Sarah unlocked her door, David stirred and looked up at Marcus with sleepy eyes. Will you come back and see my skyscraper again? He asked drowsily. Absolutely, Marcus promised, and he meant it. As he drove home that night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened that day, though he couldn't identify what it was. David had gotten under his skin in the best possible way, and Sarah had shown him glimpses of a kind of family happiness he had never experienced. What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah lay awake that entire night, staring at the ceiling and wrestling with a secret that grew heavier with each passing day. Watching Marcus interact with David had stirred feelings and memories she had buried deep, and for the first time in years, she was beginning to wonder if keeping the truth hidden was really protecting anyone at all. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a regular presence in Sarah and David's lives. He kept his promise to take David to a construction site, arranging for a Saturday visit to a residential project where his crew was building a family home. David wore a bright yellow hard hat that was too big for his head, and asked so many questions that the other workers started calling him Little Engineer. Marcus found himself looking forward to their time together, more than he had anticipated. David's enthusiasm for building and creating things reminded Marcus why he had fallen in love with construction work in the first place. The boy had a natural understanding of how things fit together, and more importantly, he had the patience to work through problems when his creations didn't work the first time. Sarah watched these interactions with growing anxiety. Every time Marcus ruffled David's hair or praised his latest block creation, she saw similarities that made her heart race. The way David concentrated when he was building something, tongue poking out slightly in concentration, was exactly the way Marcus looked when he was explaining how a foundation worked. David's laugh, his hand gestures when he got excited, even the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. There were echoes of Marcus in all of it. One evening, after Marcus had stayed for dinner and helped David with a challenging homework assignment about simple machines, Sarah's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, stopped by to return a borrowed measuring cup. That man is so good with David, the elderly woman observed, watching through the window as Marcus and David worked together to build a pulley system in the backyard using rope and a bucket. They look like father and son out there. Sarah's hands froze as she washed dishes. They're just friends, she said quickly. Mrs. Rodriguez studied Sarah's face with the sharp eyes of someone who had raised 6 children of her own. Mija, that boy has been asking about his father more lately. He told me yesterday that he wishes he had a dad like Marcus. David's father isn't part of our lives, Sarah said, the words coming out more sharply than she intended. I know, sweetheart. But children need to understand where they come from. David is getting older. Soon he'll start asking harder questions. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. She thought about the choice she had made 9 years ago, when she discovered she was pregnant after a brief relationship with a man she barely knew. Marcus had been just 23 then, working for a construction company in Phoenix and living the carefree life of a young single man. They had met at a friend's party, spent one weekend together, and then he had moved to another city for a job. Sarah had tried to contact him when she found out about the pregnancy, but his phone number was disconnected and she had no way to reach him. Faced with raising a child alone, Sarah had made the difficult decision to start fresh somewhere new. She moved to this city when David was 3, telling everyone, including David, that his father was not involved in their lives. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She had convinced herself that she was protecting David from the rejection she assumed would come if Marcus ever found out about him. Now, watching Marcus's genuine affection for David, Sarah wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But how could she possibly explain to either of them that they had been father and son all along? How could she tell Marcus that he had a child he never knew about? How could she tell David that the man he was growing to love as a father figure actually was his father? The next Saturday, Marcus arrived to find David unusually quiet. The boy was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a school assignment with frustrated tears in his eyes. "What's wrong, buddy?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair next to him. "We have to do a family tree for social studies," David said, his voice small. "Everyone else knows about their grandparents and stuff, but I only have Mom." Sarah, who was making lunch in the kitchen, felt her heart break a little. This was exactly what she had been dreading. Marcus looked at the blank paper in front of David. "Well, you know about your mom's family, right? Tell me about your grandparents on her side." "Mom's parents died when she was young, kind of like your parents did. She doesn't like to talk about them much." David looked up at Marcus with those serious brown eyes. "Do you think my dad ever wonders about me?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He found himself looking into David's face, really looking, and for the first time he noticed details he had overlooked before. The shape of David's nose was familiar. The way his ears stuck out slightly was exactly like Marcus's own childhood photos. Most striking of all were David's hands, long fingers and a thumb that bent back slightly, just like Marcus's. "I'm sure your father thinks about you," Marcus said carefully, his mind racing. "Any man would be lucky to have you as a son." From the kitchen. Sarah watched this exchange with growing panic. She could see Marcus studying David's features, could practically see the wheels turning in his mind. She had always known this day might come, but she still felt completely unprepared for it. "Marcus," she said, her voice slightly strained, "could you help me reach something from the top shelf?" In the kitchen, away from David's hearing, Sarah gripped the counter to steady herself. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." But before she could continue, David called out from the other room. "Mom, what's my dad's name? I want to put it on my family tree even if he's not here." Sarah and Marcus looked at each other, and in that moment, Marcus saw the truth written clearly across her face. The carefully controlled expression she had been maintaining crumbled, replaced by fear, guilt, and desperate hope, all mixed together. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "How old is David exactly?" "He'll be 9 in 3 months, she whispered back, tears starting to form in her eyes. Marcus did the math quickly in his head. 9 months of pregnancy, plus 8 years and 9 months of life. That brought them back to almost exactly 9 years ago. Back to Phoenix. Back to that weekend when he had met a beautiful woman at a party, spent 2 magical days with her, and then left for a job in Denver without looking back. "Sarah Mitchell," Marcus said, remembering now. "That was your maiden name, wasn't it? At the party, you said you were Sarah Mitchell." Sarah nodded, unable to speak as tears flowed freely down her cheeks. "And I'm David's father," Marcus continued, the words feeling strange and momentous in his mouth. "Yes," Sarah whispered. "I tried to find you when I found out I was pregnant, but your number was disconnected. I didn't know how to reach you." Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter, his legs suddenly feeling weak. In the other room, David was still working on his family tree, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. Marcus thought about all the moments over the past few weeks when he had felt that strange sense of familiarity with the boy. His subconscious had been trying to tell him something his conscious mind couldn't accept. Does he know? Marcus asked. Sarah shook her head. I never told him who his father was. I told him that his father wasn't ready to be a parent, which I thought was true. I never imagined I would meet you again, especially not like this. Marcus looked through the kitchen doorway at David, who was now drawing careful lines connecting family members on his assignment. His son. This amazing, brilliant, kind little boy was his son. What do we do now? Marcus asked, his voice full of wonder and fear in equal measure. Sarah wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. I don't know, she admitted, but I think it's time David learned the truth about his family tree. The conversation with David didn't happen that day. After the revelation in the kitchen, Marcus needed time to process the life-changing information, and Sarah needed time to figure out how to explain 8 years of omitted truth to her son. They agreed to meet the following weekend to discuss how to approach the situation together. Marcus spent the week in a daze, going through the motions of his work while his mind reeled with the implications of what he had learned. He had a son. An 8-year-old son who was intelligent, kind, and everything Marcus could have hoped for in a child. But he also felt a deep anger at the years they had lost, mixed with guilt over his own role in Sarah's impossible situation. He remembered that weekend in Phoenix more clearly now. Sarah had been working as a substitute teacher then, taking classes toward her teaching degree. She was beautiful, smart, and kind, but Marcus had been focused entirely on his career advancement. When the construction company offered him a supervisory position in Denver, he had jumped at the chance without a second thought about the woman he was leaving behind. Sarah, meanwhile, was struggling with her own emotions. She had spent 8 years convincing herself that she had made the right choice in raising David alone. She had built their life around the assumption that Marcus either wouldn't want to be involved or would disrupt their stability. Now, seeing his genuine shock and the immediate love that had appeared in his eyes when he looked at David, she wondered if she had robbed both of them of something precious. The week crawled by until finally Saturday arrived. Marcus came to their apartment, but this time the atmosphere was tense and awkward instead of warm and welcoming. David sensed the change immediately. Are you guys fighting? He asked with the directness children possess. No, sweetheart, Sarah said, sitting down on the couch and patting the cushion next to her. But we need to have an important conversation with you. David looked between the two adults, clearly sensing that something significant was about to happen. Marcus sat in the chair across from them, his hands clasped tightly together. David, Sarah began carefully. Do you remember when you asked about your father? Yeah, you said he wasn't ready to be a dad when I was born. Sarah nodded. That's what I believed at the time, but sometimes life surprises us in ways we never expect. She took a deep breath. Marcus is your father, David. The boy stared at her for a long moment, then looked at Marcus, then back at his mother. Marcus is my dad? He asked, as if he needed to hear the words again to believe them. Yes, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm your father, David. I didn't know about you before now, but I'm your father. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, hope, and finally something that looked like cautious joy. So when I wished I had a dad like you, I actually already did? Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. Yes, son, you already did. David was quiet for several minutes, processing this information in the serious way he approached all new concepts. Finally, he asked, why didn't you know about me before? Sarah and Marcus had discussed how to answer this question. They had agreed to be honest but age-appropriate. When your mom found out she was going to have you, I had already moved to a different city for work, Marcus explained. She tried to contact me, but she couldn't find me. We lost touch with each other. So you didn't leave because you didn't want me? David asked, voicing his deepest fear. Oh, David, Marcus said, moving to kneel in front of the boy. I would never have left if I had known about you. You are the most amazing person I've ever met, and I am so proud to be your father. David threw his arms around Marcus's neck, and both of them started crying. Sarah watched through her own tears as father and son held each other for the first time, knowing they were father and son. The next few weeks were a period of adjustment for all three of them. David adapted to the news with the resilience that children often display, but he also had moments of confusion and anger. Sometimes he would ask Sarah why she hadn't tried harder to find Marcus, and other times he would worry that Marcus might leave again now that he knew the truth. Marcus threw himself into fatherhood with an intensity that was both touching and overwhelming. He wanted to make up for 8 lost years all at once, bringing David gifts, planning elaborate outings, and spending every free moment he had with his son. Sarah appreciated his enthusiasm but worried about David becoming too dependent on this new relationship too quickly. One evening, after Marcus had left following another dinner at their apartment, David was unusually quiet as Sarah helped him get ready for bed. "Mom," he said as she tucked him in, "are you and Marcus going to get married now?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "Why would you think that, honey?" "Because that's what happens in movies when people find out they have kids together. The mom and dad fall in love and get married, and everyone lives happily ever after." Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. "Marcus and I are still figuring out how to be friends and how to both be your parents. Marriage is something completely different. But don't you like him?" David pressed. "He's nice and he makes you smile." Sarah did like Marcus, more than she was comfortable admitting to herself. Over the past weeks, she had seen glimpses of the man he had become, and she was impressed by his character, his work ethic, and especially his devotion to David. But the situation was complicated by years of secrets and the reality that they were essentially strangers who happened to share a child. "I do like Marcus," Sarah admitted, "but being parents together and being married are very different things. Right now we need to focus on what's best for you." Meanwhile, Marcus was having his own internal struggles. He had consulted with a lawyer about his parental rights, not because he wanted to take David away from Sarah, but because he wanted to understand his legal standing as a father. The lawyer had explained that since he wasn't on David's birth certificate and had never been legally established as the father, he would need to go through formal paternity proceedings to have any official rights. The legal implications weighed heavily on Marcus's mind. He loved David fiercely and wanted to be involved in every aspect of his life: school decisions, medical choices, future planning. But he also recognized that Sarah had been David's sole parent for 8 years and had earned the right to make decisions about their son. These tensions came to a head 3 weeks after the revelation, during what should have been a happy occasion. David's little league team had made it to the championship game, and both Sarah and Marcus planned to attend. But when they arrived at the field, there was confusion about who would sit in the parents section and who David should run to after the game. David seemed torn between his two parents, unsure of the new dynamics and protocols. When he hit his first ever home run in the bottom of the 6th inning, he rounded the bases looking back and forth between Sarah and Marcus, as if he couldn't decide which parent to celebrate with first. After the game, which David's team won, the three of them walked to Marcus's truck in awkward silence. David was carrying his trophy, but his joy seemed dampened by the tension between the adults. "David," Marcus said as they reached the parking lot, "why don't you wait in the truck for a minute? Your mom and I need to talk." Once David was out of earshot, Sarah turned to Marcus with frustration evident on her face. "We can't keep doing this to him. He shouldn't have to choose between us or worry about hurting one of our feelings." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "But I don't know how to fix it. I want to be his father in every way possible, but I also don't want to disrupt the life you've built with him." Sarah looked back at David, who was sitting in the truck looking small and confused despite his big victory. "Maybe we need to establish some clear boundaries and routines. Scheduled time, specific responsibilities, that kind of thing." "Like a custody arrangement," Marcus said, the words feeling strange and formal. "I guess so. I never thought I'd be co-parenting with someone, but that's what this is, isn't it?" They spent the next hour sitting on a bench at the baseball field, working out the logistics of their new reality. Marcus would pick David up from school on Wednesdays and have him every other weekend. They would alternate major holidays and both attend important events like school plays and baseball games. They would make major decisions about David together, and neither would make significant changes to his routine without consulting the other. It felt businesslike and cold, but it also felt necessary. David needed structure and predictability, as he adjusted to having two parents in his life. When they returned to the truck to explain the new arrangement to David, he listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions about how it would work. His maturity continued to amaze both of them. "So I'll have two homes now?" he asked. "You'll always have your home with Mom," Marcus explained. "But I'm going to find a bigger apartment with a room just for you, for when you stay with me." David nodded seriously. "And you'll both still love me the same amount?" "Even more than the same amount," Sarah assured him. "Having two parents who love you just means you have twice as much love in your life." As they drove David home that evening, Sarah found herself thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez's words about children needing to understand where they come from. David finally knew his complete family tree, but now they all had to figure out how to make this new family structure work. That night, after David was asleep, Sarah sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea and thought about how dramatically her life had changed since that rainy night at the ATM. She had gained a co-parent for David, but she had also gained something she hadn't expected: a deep respect and growing affection for the man Marcus had become. Whether that would develop into something more remained to be seen, but for now, she was content knowing that David would grow up with two parents who loved him completely. 6 months later, the new routine had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Marcus had found a 2-bedroom apartment across town with a yard where David could practice baseball, and he had decorated David's room with construction-themed posters and a desk where they could work on building projects together. David thrived under the arrangement, gaining confidence from having two parents who were actively involved in his life. The legal formalities had been completed as well. DNA tests had confirmed what they all knew to be true, and Marcus was now officially on David's birth certificate. They had worked with a mediator to establish a formal co-parenting agreement that protected everyone's interests while keeping David's well-being as the top priority. Sarah had been surprised by how much she enjoyed having someone to share parenting responsibilities with. When David had a nightmare about a monster under his bed, she could call Marcus and he would drive over at midnight to help check all the closets and under the furniture. When David's teacher requested a conference about his academic progress, both parents could attend and offer different perspectives on how to help him succeed. Marcus had also surprised himself with how naturally fatherhood came to him. He found that his construction experience translated well to helping with science projects, and his patient problem-solving approach worked perfectly for homework struggles and friendship drama. David had even started showing his projects to other kids at school, proudly explaining that his dad was teaching him about engineering. The turning point in their relationship as a family came during David's 9th birthday party. Sarah had planned a small celebration at a local park with David's baseball teammates and a few friends from school. Marcus had offered to help set up, arriving early with decorations and a cake he had picked up from the bakery. As they worked together to arrange tables and hang streamers, they fell into an easy partnership that felt natural and unforced. When Sarah struggled to reach a high branch to hang a banner, Marcus steadied the ladder for her. When Marcus couldn't figure out how to work the park's barbecue grill, Sarah showed him the trick to getting it lit. "You two work well together," observed Linda, the mother of one of David's teammates. "How long have you been married?" Sarah and Marcus looked at each other, both starting to speak at the same time. "We're not married," Sarah said finally. "We're co-parenting." Linda looked confused. "Oh, I just assumed. You seem so comfortable with each other, and David talks about both of you like you're a family unit." After Linda walked away, Marcus and Sarah found themselves standing closer together than they had in months. "Do we seem like a family unit?" Marcus asked quietly. Sarah considered this. "I think we've become something like that, haven't we? Not in a traditional sense, but David is right. We are his family." The party was a huge success. David beamed as his friends from school met Marcus for the first time, proudly introducing him as "my dad who builds houses." When it came time to open presents, David insisted that both his parents sit on either side of him, and Sarah was struck by how right it felt to be flanked by Marcus and David, working together to untangle ribbon and exclaim over each gift. Marcus's gift to David was special, a child-sized tool belt with real tools and a promise to teach him basic carpentry over the summer. David's reaction was everything Marcus had hoped for and more. The boy threw his arms around Marcus's neck and whispered, "This is the best birthday ever because I finally have a real dad." That evening, after all the guests had gone home and David had fallen asleep surrounded by his new toys, Sarah and Marcus sat on her apartment's small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about the day. "He's growing up so fast," Sarah mused, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Sometimes I can't believe how much has changed since that night at the ATM." "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Meeting me again, I mean. Your life was simpler before I showed up." Sarah considered this seriously. "Simpler, yes, but not better. David is happier now than I've ever seen him. He has a father who loves him and wants to be involved in his life. That's something I could never have given him on my own." "What about you?" Marcus pressed. "Are you happier?" Sarah turned to look at him, studying his face in the fading light. "I think I am. It's been an adjustment, learning to share decisions and coordinate schedules, but it's also been nice to have a partner in this, someone who cares about David as much as I do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the evening, children playing in the distance, cars passing on the street. Below, the gentle hum of air conditioners working against the late spring heat. "Sarah," Marcus said eventually, "I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest with me." Sarah felt her heart rate quicken. "Okay. Do you think there could ever be something between us? Not just as David's parents, but as us?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah had been wondering the same thing for weeks, but had been afraid to examine her feelings too closely. "I don't know," she said honestly. 6 months ago, you were a stranger who helped me in the rain. Now you're the father of my child and one of the most important people in my life. I care about you, Marcus, more than I expected to." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "I care about you too, more than just as the mother of my son. You're an amazing woman, Sarah. You raised an incredible child on your own, and you've been so generous in sharing him with me." "So what do we do with these feelings?" Sarah asked. "I think we take it slow," Marcus said. "David has been through enough changes. We don't want to confuse him or make him feel like his family structure is unstable." Sarah nodded. "But maybe we could start spending more time together as a family, not just scheduled visitation, but actual family time." "I'd like that," Marcus agreed. Over the following weeks, they began to blend their separate relationships with David into something that felt more like a traditional family. Marcus would stay for dinner after dropping David off on Sunday evenings. Sarah would join Marcus and David for their Saturday morning breakfast tradition at the local diner. They started taking family trips to the zoo, the science museum, and the beach. David noticed the change immediately and seemed to approve wholeheartedly. He started referring to outings as family adventures, and would beam with pride when strangers assumed they were a married couple. The final piece of their puzzle fell into place on a warm evening in late summer. They had taken David to an outdoor concert in the park, and he had fallen asleep between them on the blanket as the symphony played under the stars. Sarah's head was resting on Marcus's shoulder, and his arm was wrapped around both her and David. "This feels right," Marcus whispered into Sarah's hair. "It does," she agreed, tilting her face up to look at him. "I love you, Sarah," Marcus said, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. "I love you too," Sarah replied, and she meant it completely. They were married the following spring in the same park where they had shared their first family picnic. David served as the ring bearer, proudly walking down the aisle in a small tuxedo that matched his father's. In his speech at the reception, David told their guests that sometimes the best families are the ones that find each other when they least expect it. As they danced to their first song as a married couple, Sarah thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A broken ATM, a rainstorm, a simple act of kindness between strangers, All of it had led to a family that neither of them could have planned, but both of them had dreamed of. Marcus spun her around on the dance floor, and Sarah caught sight of David sitting at the head table, grinning from ear to ear as he watched his parents dance. She had given him the greatest gift she could imagine, a complete family and the knowledge that he was loved beyond measure by both of the people who had created him. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the universe really does put people exactly where they need to be, even when they don't know it at the time. That rainy night at the ATM had seemed like just another difficult moment in a series of challenges, but it had actually been the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of all their lives.